Cheers! I dedicate this moment to anybody who has ever made or modified or hacked something. Cheers. Seriously. There is times where I would be happy to spend money to buy a product that I could take and put on something and put the bolts in and be done. Seriously, I do not enjoy doing things the hard way. A lot of people think I do. I do a lot of things the hard way because either I'm not smart enough to know there's an easier way, but more often, the thing that I want to do has either never been done before or has not been done enough times to be commercially viable. And that's probably the bigger part of it. Alright. So, case in point, the Franken light on the motorcycle out there. Yeah, it's kind of silly. I think it'll work. I think it'll work pretty good. I think it's probably the coolest thing ever. I remember the first time I saw a motorcycle that I considered a desert racer. Probably something like Paris to Dakar type of motorcycle. The Africa Twin that Honda just released is of that mindset. The image in my mind of a bike that was just too tall. It had just an enormous gas tank on it. It had crash bars. It had two great big giant Hella headlights. And then various stuff tied on everywhere. And it was just flying across the sand dune. I mean, not touching the ground. You could see dust following it as it floated through the air into the horizon. You know, this picture is etched in my mind. And I probably was 14 or 15 the first time I saw it. And I'm like, desert racer. That's what I want. You know, I lived in Canada. There wasn't a lot of deserts up there. But growing up on gravel roads, I could kind of appreciate something like that. It had a pretty good sized motor in it. It had really long suspension, so it could just fly down whatever road or trail or path it was on and soak up the potholes. And, you know, then fast forward to, I guess 6 or 7 years ago now, where I actually had some money for a change. I sold my Porsche and I bought my first KLR and went off on the Alaska adventure. I didn't work for over a year. It was the coolest thing ever. And there has never been any regret. You know, I left a job that was not going anywhere. I was making okay money. I had a decent enough apartment. I lived in Edmonton, Canada. But there was times where it was 40, 50 below and my car was frozen to the ground and I couldn't drive it. You know, it literally was frozen to the ground. I'm like, screw this, you know. So I started, you know, reading travel adventure blogs and stuff like that. And what actually, I think that the progression isn't really clear sometimes until I really look back. You know, why did I do that? You know. But I started thinking I wanted to go see the world, right? So Green Dragon was actually RTW, round the world. I just didn't have the money to get that far. But it was, you know, it may not be over either. You know, I may pick it up and decide to go do another section sometime. Alright, so initially I was reading backpacking blogs and travel logs of people who had gone off and done the See the World adventure by backpacking, which in a lot of respects is a lot more practical, actually. So here's the deal is you just take a duffel bag or a backpack and you could walk, you can hitchhike, you might just take, you know, surface transportation. So for instance, I spent most of the winter down in Belize at the end of the motorcycle trip. And, well, kind of in the middle, actually. So, I had done Alaska. I came back down to Washington State. It was getting kind of late in the year, and I didn't have any good plans. And I didn't want to be stuck too far north in the winter. All right, that was about as far as I got. So, my parents are involved with an orphanage or children's home program down in Belize, Central America. And they were talking, they had had some donations come in of pretty good substance, and they were building a new home for them on new property. And they were looking for volunteers to go down there and work. And I'm like, okay, so explain exactly how this works. And they're like, well, there's a place that you can live, but you're responsible for your own food, and then you just work every day, or 5 or 6 days a week or whatever. I think it was mainly if you worked 5 days a week, they let you stay on the property there. So what was kind of cool is they had built a volunteer home first before they built the children's home on the new property. So the idea was is people could come down there for a few weeks, live in this house that was built. And it was more of a barracks or a dormitory type setup. So you could live there while you were working. So you didn't have to, go stay in a hotel or something. So that was kind of slick. I'm like, all right, so how long can I stay down there? And they're like, well, so how long do you want to stay down there? I'm like, well, until spring. I just didn't want to be stuck in the winter. So I'm like, this is a clever shortcut to get out of winter is go find a volunteer program in Central America. So here I am down there. I'm like, this is great, So my dad and I flew down there. I left the motorcycle up in Washington State. Worked down there for 3 or 4 months, 4 or 5 months. I forget exactly when I came back, but I think I was back in Washington State by March. And so I was down there September or October. I don't remember exactly. I know I wasn't at my dad's very long before we went down there, so I was like, all right. I often joked at the time of, I came down to visit my parents, and within a week, they had bought me a one-way ticket to Central America. Cheers. Yeah. So that was fun. So they were going to buy me a round trip, and I was like, well, I don't know how long I want to be down there. And I knew I had enough money to get myself home. So I'm like, just give me a one-way ticket, and then I'll figure out what I want to do when I'm done. Okay, that sounds great. So you don't save very much money going one way. It's just, I didn't want to have a committed coming home date. Or, keep changing the ticket kind of thing. So I was down there for a while, and then my dad came back. He had only planned on being down there for a month or something like that. And then they came down again towards spring. And that was about the time I was thinking I was ready to leave. And I had done my tax paperwork online. There was a little cafe down there that had internet. Actually, it was a Chinese restaurant that had internet. So I knew I had money coming, but you're never really sure exactly when it's going to be there. So I had a couple $100 was about all I had left. It was, not a lot, but I figured it was enough. So I looked at my options, and I was like, okay, so I could take a bus out of Belize into Mexico, and then find in Mexico, the airline industry never really got a lot of money, so it doesn't really get well developed down there. But they put a lot of money into buses, so it's not, Greyhound used to be a great way to travel, and now it's kind of what poor people do, I guess. And it's not necessarily the rich people riding buses in Mexico either, but riding a bus through Mexico is a pretty good experience, especially further south. Once I crossed over into Baja, that bus was kind of run down, but the other buses were really nice. They were like, almost first class. You didn't have somebody serving you all the time, but it was a really comfortable seat, nice clean bus, very nice bus. So anyway, not a hardship at all riding a bus through Mexico. So I rode all the way from basically from Belize all the way up to Tijuana, and then I walked across into San Diego. So I say that because some of the travel logs that I read, that looked like a pretty good idea, actually. Just backpacking, jumping on a bus. And it's not, I don't think walking across Thailand is the ideal way to get somewhere. But if you could find common transportation in each country, and then, India has trains and different, like if you're in Europe, you can get all over Europe on the Eurorail, and you can buy a month-long pass and you can go everywhere, and some of my family have done that. So that was kind of the idea I was looking at, is like, okay, so I could get to Europe, spend a few months there, go around and, visit the sites and take the pictures and do all the stuff that I wanted to do. And every couple of days you stay in a hostel or something like that. And then you get travel companies like Rick Steves. He's got a travel show on PBS. He's based out of Washington State. And I had seen his shows, actually bought his DVD set. They're actually on YouTube now. You can go watch them there for free. But he's on PBS, and then he's based out of Washington State. So a couple times a year or so, he has a free travel program. So you go to, is it Everett? I forget exactly where now. It's north of Seattle. Anyway, if you're in the area, look it up. Get on his mail list and you find out when the next one is. And for free, about once an hour, there's a presentation in either the community center or performing arts center and one of the theaters. And you got thousands of people there just walking back and forth between them because they want to see the France presentation, then they want to see something about castles, and then they want to go see Italy. Okay. So you got people there that are there the entire day, plus his headquarters are there, and you can go sign up for his tours. And they also have some travel aids that you can buy, books. In fact, they give you last year's books for free at some of the presentations, because they're not going to sell them, so they just got extra books. So here, you can take one of our travel books, and most of the stuff hasn't changed from year to year, Or you go to his office and you can book a tour, or you can buy, they get some really cool suitcases and stuff that are made for light travel, because you do one of his tours and you may be in 15 cities in 20 days or something like that. So a lot of it is moving from place to place to place, and then you sleep that night, and then you get up and you go somewhere else. So you don't want to be burdened down with, 3 or 4 steamer cases kind of thing. Anyway, so I'd been to some of his presentations, and at some point, so I wasn't thinking motorcycles yet. I was thinking just traveling on the hoof, or taking a bus, or taking a train. I'd also done a little bit of Amtrak, and that was kind of cool. So I started seeing travel blogs of motorcycles, and I'm like, okay, that's kind of clever, because then you put everything on the motorcycle, and you don't have to carry it. And then you could ride all day, and then wherever you decide to camp, because I like camping, so you just go find a spot. And some of the guys were wild camping, so you don't pay the park fee. You just go find a spot, and off the side of the road somewhere, and you set up your little camp, and that really appealed to me. So then I was like, okay, there was a few different ones that I saw where the guys were traveling from Alaska all the way down to the tip of Central America, or to South America. Pan American Highway or something like that. So there's almost a continuous road all the way down, right? And I'm like, whoa, that would be cool. I was pretty sure I didn't have enough money to do that. But I thought, well, if I did it in stages, I could do the Alaska part, because I was already in Canada. I was in Edmonton. So that's not very far from mile zero of the Alaska Highway. But because I'm Canadian, I thought about it. I'm like, well, in addition to doing Alaska, I wanted to see the Yukon and Northwest Territories. And so there's a city, I think it's technically a city. It's a pretty good size town, if not a city, called Inuvik, or Nuvit. I realized I wrote it down wrong at one point, so I'm not sure exactly of the spelling. It doesn't really matter. But from Dawson City, you go up what's called the Dempster Highway, and it's about 500 miles one way of gravel road. All right, so I did that, and then I came back down to Dawson City, and then I went over the top of the World Highway, crosses at fairly high elevation into Alaska. And I think it's the northernmost U.S. border checkpoint. All right, so I crossed that, and then from there I went to up as far as Fairbanks, Alaska, and then I backtracked down and went across to Anchorage, and then I went back down the Alaska Highway through Whitehorse and on down, and went down to Kelowna, and then down to my dad's house, and from there is where I went down to Belize. So after seeing some of the other the write-ups and the blogs that the guys were writing, I'm like, okay, that's pretty much what I want to do. And since I'm already living in Edmonton at the time, do that now, because I don't want to have to start somewhere else and then go all the way up there, right? So this way I'm already there, do the quick north, I say the quick north. It's a long freaking way from Edmonton to Anchorage. Alaska is big. It's huge. It's pretty big, but worth it. Totally worth it. End of a long day. That's good. Okay, so where I was going with that, in the back of my mind when I decided I wanted to do the Alaska trip, then I remembered the desert racing motorcycles, right? And so I kind of pictured, I was aware of, I think I had seen a KLR, and I'd seen, the Honda 650 twin, DR 650 or whatever it is, or 650 single, I guess, and some others, and, the Beamers I'd seen, but they're really expensive. And the more I read, a lot of people kept talking about the KLR. And the KLR is famous for being kind of the Jeep of motorcycles. In fact, the Marine Corps used them for quite a while for their scouts. I'm not sure if they still are or not. But they took KLR, slightly modified it. Well, then they dropped the diesel motor in it for common fuel with everything else in their fleet. But it would be really cool to get one of those. But it was about a $20,000 motor in a $6,000 motorcycle. So, yeah. Good luck finding one of those. But anyway, I've heard of people getting them. They do pop up from time to time on surplus. So, at any rate, the KLR, it starts off as a basic bike, and people, and I agree, they will say that it's not good for anything as is, but it's easily modified. So you buy the KLR and you're like, okay, great, I got a KLR, and then you're like, okay, it's got the world's worst seat, it sits up too tall for most people, the tires that it comes with are awful, the headlights are not very good, nobody likes the handlebar grips, the gas tank is metal and you're always thinking you're going to break that, the water pump sticks out too far, people are worried about breaking that. It's got a radiator, which is good because it's liquid cooling, so it doesn't overheat, but the radiator is fragile, and if you drop your bike, you break the radiator. On the opposite side is the coolant overflow tank. You can break that. I've broken one of those. So all of a sudden you got a bike you don't really like anymore, so you replace everything on it, right? So the trick would be buy a used one. Don't buy a $7,000 bike out of the showroom. Buy a $3,000 bike that somebody else was going to do all the stuff on and then never did. There's a lot of KLRs that are 3 or 4 years old that have 1,000 miles on them. They're out there, and people are selling them for $2,000 or $3,000 because it's the bike they always dreamed of, and then they don't end up riding it very much. So look for one of those. You'll get a good deal. I'm on my second one already. I had 12 or 13,000 miles on this one, and I think I put 20,000 on the first one. So look for that. They're good for a lot of miles. There's enough people that have them that it's easy to find most of what you want. You can get a center stand, you can get replacement seats, there's bigger gas tanks that are made out of plastic, there's crash bars, there's luggage and kits for putting load hauling stuff on them and all kinds of stuff. Or, a lot of what I did, I bought a sewing machine and military spec webbing and Velcro, and I made a lot of my own straps, bought some bags and sewed straps onto them so I could just directly attach them to the bike. I bought a waterproof shipping container. I bought ammo cans that I could put some of the heavier stuff in, bolted that all to the bike. You could do whatever you wanted to it, and you didn't feel like, oh, I'm screwing up a $13,000 BMW motorcycle. It's only I got mine for $2,500 or $3,500 or something like that. So you didn't feel too bad about it, and you can always sell it when you're done. So anyway, I don't remember what I was talking about anymore. It was fun. One thing I would say, though, for travel, this was something that didn't occur to me at first with the motorcycle until I was out for a while. Because I never really made locking cases, most of the stuff on the bike was kind of like just bungeed down into place, and it worked well for that. But as I got more into civilization, I realized I didn't feel comfortable parking the bike and walking into a store, because all my stuff was basically just held down with bungee straps. Alright. And I also traveled a bit sort of backpacking or on a train or on a bus, and I had the same experience where if you've got more stuff than you can easily carry, like if you had to go into a restroom, you wouldn't want to carry it all in there with you. All of a sudden you're a prisoner to your stuff, because that backpack or duffel bag is pretty much everything you own and everything you need to live. And you can't just put it down and walk away. Where the contrast was, a lot of my trips, I've had a couple of vans or a couple of cars where, I could drive, get out, lock the door, walk away. My stuff is basically secure. Yeah, somebody can break the window, but it's not just sitting there. That really hit me when I was in San Diego, when I first came across from Belize through Mexico. As long as I was on the bus, most of my stuff was in the bottom of the bus in the cargo bays. So it was relatively secure. And then when you got to the bus stop, you grabbed all your stuff, you found the next bus, you got on it, you put the stuff in there, and then you were just riding along, So you kind of had a little bit of, a couple hours where you had to kind of hang on to your stuff and watch out so you didn't leave it. But when you were actually moving, you were okay. Then I planned on spending a little bit of time in San Diego, and I realized that, now I've got a pretty good sized duffel bag and a couple $1,000s worth of cameras and a laptop. And I didn't know what to do with it, right? And at the time when I first came across, I didn't have a lot of money. I had enough money to get an Amtrak ticket back up to my dad's place. So I got to take the train from Seattle, or from San Diego to Seattle, and then enter Central Washington. And so then I knew I was going to make it home. I was kind of close before that. I wasn't sure if I had a lot, but I knew I had enough to get back. And then I stopped at like a Starbucks because I hadn't checked the internet for a couple of days. And I'm sitting there drinking a cup of coffee, and it was early morning. I'd been up all night because I had walked across the border at about midnight, found an all-night sandwich place, and was just kind of hanging out for a little bit, trying to figure out what I wanted to do. And I checked my bank balance just as my phone was dying, and I realized that I had about $3,000 in the bank. I'm like, yes, the tax return has gone through. So I'm like, woohoo. So I realized I was within about 3 blocks of a really nice hotel, and I hadn't had a hot shower in a couple weeks at that point, I think. So checked in. It's one of the hotels that are right across from where the cruise ships come in, so it was way too expensive, but it was nice. So I got there and took a nice long hot shower, probably ate something, then fell asleep, slept most of the afternoon because I'd been up all night, and ran amok, spent a few bucks, walked around, saw a lot of the sites that I had planned on seeing, but now I was able to leave my all my gear in the hotel, so that's kind of a thing. If you can find a place to put your stuff, then you're free to travel. If you're hanging on to it, then you really got to look at how much stuff do you have. So that's something to think about. Now it's a lot easier because you can take your cell phone, take pictures on your cell phone. You get your cell phone for GPS, internet, Facebook, all your email, and you can call people, I suppose, on it, I guess. That, as opposed to, where I had a video camera and a still camera and a laptop. Okay, now you could do it all with the cell phone, so that would cut down my weight considerably. But since at the time I was a photographer, I really wanted to have a camera. So when you have a digital camera, then you need a laptop. Never regretted it though. I figured, okay, if you do a trip like that when you're old, you're too old to really enjoy it. My parents still travel a lot, so I know that it's, you don't just die when you're 65. But for me, the motorcycle trip, doing it in my late 40s, or mid 40s, I guess, it would have been different doing it now in my 50s. I woke up a couple of times where I was covered in frost. One morning I woke up and it had snowed all night, and I was snowed into the campsite. That changes how you look at things, right? But when you're young enough to enjoy it, and my retirement plans didn't change very much by taking a year off, right? So, I can always say, I sold a Porsche, I bought a motorcycle, and I went and traveled for a year. It wasn't much of a Porsche, but I can still say I did it, Live life, yeah. I'm not sure where that was all supposed to go, but whatever. Till the next time.